Él preside una organización que está haciendo investigación para ayudar a resolver el gran problema de cáncer a nivel global. Y en el mes de mayo hicieron una inversión de alrededor de $28 millones en Puerto Rico, en Toa Baja, para establecer su planta de investigación de Research and Development. Para nosotros, este tipo de iniciativa que puede lograr una solución a un verdadero gran problema que tiene la humanidad es maravilloso. Así que, por favor, ayúdenme a recibir con un fuerte aplauso presidente de CytoImmune, su empresa, Will Rosellini.
I'm going to use this.
Perfect.
First off, thank you to the committee for having me. I'll be speaking in English. I've been here 6 years, but my 8-year-old daughter is embarrassed anytime I try to roll my R's, so I'll stick to English. Very quickly, I want to provide as much value as I can. How many of you guys are entrepreneurs or planning on being an entrepreneur? Okay, so the majority here. So my goal today is to give you as much knowledge as I've gotten over the last 15 years of doing this as quickly as possible. And then at the end of the talk, would love to continue the conversation, give you my contact information, and offer you some free resources that I wish I had when I was starting out on my journey. I'm an entrepreneur, but I started off as a minor league baseball player that couldn't figure out how to throw a curveball for strikes in the big leagues. I took advantage of the Arizona Diamondbacks college scholarship program and ended up getting 6 advanced graduate degrees. So I have a JD MBA and 4 advanced graduate degrees covering neuroscience, computational biology, and regulatory science. And all that said, I became the expert at talking to mad scientists, professors, and doctors that had ideas that they wanted help translating out of the university. So over the last 15 years, I've started 5 companies. We've raised about $200 million to date. About half of that is venture capital. The rest is angel, or what I call non-dilutive capital. And in the course of that, I'm going to start with the good news, and then the majority of my presentation is bad news for entrepreneurs. But it's the things that I wish that I had known or someone had told me before I started. So the good news. The first company I started is a company called Microtransponder. The professor that invented the technology had an idea that he wanted to hook your nervous system up to robots and control the robots with nervous system implants. This was in 2003. The technology that we developed has been commercially approved. We put an electrostimulator on your vagus nerve, and we burst electricity to drive acetylcholine and norepinephrine into the brain, and that makes you learn as fast as when you were a baby. So I got a letter today from a patient that had a stroke, had lost the use of their left side of their body, and with the technology had rehab to where they could go fishing and write me this note. And so it was a very meaningful thing. It took 20 some odd years for that success moment, and it was barely worth it, quite honestly, given the pains of entrepreneurship over this time period. So my goal today is I want to talk to you about the success ideas that I've had, the failures, and then some of the things that if you could take 1 or 2 rules today and apply them without question, the same way that I should have applied them without question, maybe you won't have to go through some of the heartache that I went through in figuring these things out. So a couple of things. Entrepreneurs looking to start a new business have to decide if they want to be rich or they want to be king. What that means is having control means you're trying to be king. As soon as you try to scale and raise capital and bring other people into your business, you lose control. Generally, the longer you remain king, the slower that you grow, and the less likely it is you'll become rich. And so your choice as an entrepreneur needs to be made at the very beginning. Are you hoping to be king and maintain control of your venture and be in charge of your business? Or are you hoping to get rich as fast as possible? Now, the interesting stats are if you raise outside capital, you'll lose control of your company in about 3 years. So somebody else will come in, you'll be fired, you won't be able to raise capital because of your inexperience. So I say when you start a venture, you should plan your exit almost immediately, which is crazy because it's really hard to have the energy to say, I'm going to start this thing and know that I'm going to be transitioned out in 3 to 4 years. 4 out of 5 founders are forced out. So this is going to happen to you. What's crazy is the faster you're successful and the faster you grow, the faster you're going to be forced out of your enterprise. And so when you think about these things as you're starting up your organization, starting up the company, you should plan for them. Technically, you're not an entrepreneur when you start a company. Technically, you're a shareholder. You're an employee. You're a member of the board of directors. So you have 3 roles that you need to be thinking of, and transitioning in and out of those roles is critical as an entrepreneur. If you look at the stats, you're probably better off getting a W-2 employment position and going off and saving for your retirement. On a pure return basis, it's probably better to get a job based on the failure rates associated with the enterprises. Like I said, guys, I've never had a job. This is bad news for entrepreneurs. I think you should do it, but I want you to go in heads up that if you go get a job as an accountant for 25 years, you might end up having more money in your retirement account when you retire. If that's attractive to you, you probably are not built to be an entrepreneur. And so what you're doing when you're starting a company is engaging in these risks because of the rewards and the upside. And so I encourage you tonight, over drinks or with your founding team or in the darkness that is being the CEO entrepreneur, ask yourself, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? And never make another decision where you're not doing more to be rich or more to be king. So the second dilemma, and these are called the founder's dilemmas. This was a study done out of Harvard. And so these stats come from a professor that studied entrepreneurship and the founder-CEO dilemma. What you'll find is you're going to make less money than most of your employees. In some cases, significantly less. In the majority of my ventures over the last 10 years, I've taken no salary. And so you're working for a liquidity event for years and years at a time. The board, who you'll recruit and be so excited when they join, will be the ones that will fire you. So when you recruit that member of the board of directors with all that experience and you're so proud to put the press release out, he will or she will be voting to fire you in 3 to 4 years based on the stats. The faster you raise capital, the more likely it is you'll be fired. So these stories of bootstrapping and scale are really, really cool. They're rare. Generally, if you have a good concept and product market fit, somebody else will have thought of it and will be raising a lot more capital a lot faster than you to bootstrap it. They're going to be able to grab advertising and market share based on throwing tons and tons of cash at the problem. And so a lot of times the competitive threat is solved by having lots and lots more cash. At the same time, the more cash you raise, the faster you're fired. The biggest element that I think people get confused on and don't know how to think about is how much equity should I give up? What's the value of my business? How do I think about these things going forward? The value of your business is totally irrelevant when you're raising capital. Capital is raised from investors that have a program. They're going to invest in 20 companies like yours at this valuation on these terms. You take it or you leave it. So even if your company is worth $80 million in the first year, you're likely raising capital at a $15 million valuation because that's how the capital works. So it doesn't really matter what you think the valuation of your company is. It matters at what valuation you can raise capital. When I was younger, I really was concerned about getting a higher and higher valuation earlier and earlier. That was really a focus for me. I wanted to maintain as much equity as I possibly could. As I've gotten older, a transaction of any kind is usually better than waiting. Raise capital when you need it. Raise capital when you don't need it. Raise way more than you think that you're going to need. Have it in the bank and raise it at lower valuations than you expect. One of the interesting things about raising at super high valuations is it's really fun when you close the round. It really stinks when you spend the next 24 months trying to raise money at an even higher valuation. So you'll likely get fired for raising too high of a valuation too early. So, founder's dilemma number 3. The VCs, and VCs I'll define and kind of tell you what that means in my world at least. They're using the founder in order to get enough equity that they can garner control and put professional management into the enterprise. And that's okay, that's how the system should work. I've been unqualified to run every company past a certain level. And only recently have I agreed to let qualified management come in, and they're so much better than I am. It's amazing how much better they are at the B round and the C round and ultimately going public. They have a totally different skill set than what it took to go from 0 to the B round of financing. The VCs and the board members that you put on the board need to understand how capital is structured. And I'll walk you through kind of what to be thinking about, what to do when you're raising capital, and what kind of milestones you need to put into your thinking. And then you need to decide at every level of the capital raise what you're going to do, and most importantly, what you're not going to do. A very big problem is companies will raise an A round or a B round or a seed round, and they'll say, we're going to go do all of this stuff. But very rarely does the CEO say, if I've raised an A round, what's the minimum I have to do to get a B round raised? And I'm doing nothing else other than what's minimally required. If you go out and you have product market fit, you've got a prototype and you're getting early sales, and you're messing around trying to buy a building and start manufacturing, which is a C round activity, but you're doing it in the A round, you've wasted money and time, and your capital will not get you to the stage of raising your B round. So you need to have a capital strategy from the very beginning all the way to your exit. So here's some additional stats in terms of how this is going to work out over time. So this is the 4th founder's dilemma. So if you get fired, I've been fired a lot as the founder, and you do it in an acrimonious way where there's an argument, you'll usually not be allowed to stay on the board. You'll not be allowed to stay within the company. And that might be okay. If you want to sort of throw a temper tantrum and say, this is my company, I started it, I'm not going to be a part of it. I don't recommend that. My recommendation is, if it's your company and it's your vision and it's your employees that you brought in, you should do whatever you can to stay in the company to make it successful. And that includes taking a demotion. That includes sticking around on the board but not being the CEO. If you do it in advance, and well in advance, you'll have a much better time. It'll be a lot easier, and your company has a lot less chance of exploding. Serial founders remain CEO for much longer. The reason why is you garner the experience of these things that CEOs require. You'll leave when it's time to leave. Once you've raised a seed round, you've gotten your A round, and you run into the wall and blow up, when you start again, you're going to be able to get a little bit further in the video game. And you're going to have a plan earlier on how far you're going to be able to get and how you manage your CEO role. Because don't forget, the most important role that you have is shareholder. That's where you're making all your money. That's where all your influence is coming from. That's why you got into this, is to be an owner. A CEO is a job. It's a job that you get a salary for that you can go get other CEO jobs. Getting a founder share of a startup company that goes on to be successful is life-changing. And so I'd encourage you to think about that as you're planning out whatever stage you're in. So we've talked about sort of the 4 founders' dilemma issues and what you should be thinking about as you go forward in planning out the enterprise. Building out a startup is the same as building out a piece of commercial real estate, building out an apartment building. You're going to have to do the land use, the permitting, the under-the-ground foundation. Then you're going to do all the planning and the mechanical, electrical finish out. It's the same. And the milestones have a similar cadence. So if you look at the seed round, you're going to raise about $50,000 to $150,000 from angel investors or incubators. VCs don't touch seed round. You need to understand in your industry what a seed round looks like. In the last year, seed rounds had pre-seed, seed, and post-seed, and the valuations were way better than they're going to be in the next year. So understanding in your space what you need to have a seed round financing is very important. Angels finance 96% of startup activity in the country. VCs are almost irrelevant, which is shocking because they make so much noise about how important they are and how they're doing everything and how they're the ones bringing in all of the entrepreneurial activity. Angels and high net worth individuals and family offices actually do a whole lot more investment at these stages. They're way more important to you than the marquee VCs that you'll see talking at conferences and getting in the news. Angels like to invest in certain ways. So once you're past the seed, you need to understand how angels invest. Traditionally, in this proof of concept, they'll do anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. They like to do it in what's called an unpriced round. So they don't want to value your company. They say, we'll give you the $1 million. When you raise your next round of financing, we'll figure out the price, and we get a 20% discount to that price since our money was in early. That's how angels like to do deals. It's called a convertible note. This is where VC comes in. VCs have a job, which is to raise a lot of money in their fund and get fees off of that money. They want to do as little work as possible to find winning companies. They do not want to invest $100,000 at a time. They would like to put lots and lots of money to work. Less work for them, more money they get to get fees on, and less diligence, right? They don't have to do as much understanding of a business. So when you see these, like the WeWork CEO raised $1 billion at a huge valuation, well, that's because VCs wanted to put more of their money to work. They also have to achieve a 20x return in one of those companies. So if you show up to them and say, hey, I'm raising $100,000, and this is going to end up being the $2 billion winner that you need in your fund to hit your return, they're not going to believe you. So that's why some serial founders can go raise huge rounds at huge valuations, because they have a chance to actually go make a 20x return. And so you need to understand where you are in the stack. So traditionally, this is sort of what you call a B round of financing. When I put together for a startup a capital strategy, I basically have an Excel chart and I've lined up each of the elements of the financing, and I say, here's what you're going to do with the money you just raised. Here's what you have to accomplish before you can raise a Series B. Here's the 5 other companies that did it. Here's their valuation. And then you back figure all of the steps needed to figure out your cap table. You don't have any questions about who gets what the options are, and how much to raise and what to do. It's all very programmatic. And so the chaos of a startup starts to go away once you start to do the capital strategy the way that I'm proposing. And then lastly, you have an exit event. Transactions are the entrepreneur's best friend. Sure, you might have left $100 million on the table, but $20 million in an exit is a huge, huge deal. And so transactions are important. Think about how you're going to get to a transaction. These are the odds, and there's actually been quite a bit of discussion, I'd say over the last 3 or 4 years at least that I've seen, in what's called sweaty startups. So this is the venture capital model. Go do a tech startup, raise a bunch of money, hope it works. You can see the odds of your success over those time periods and over those financings. So it's harder to get a VC-backed company to IPO than it would be to play in the big leagues in terms of percentage chance. A lot of people are moving to what are called sweaty startups, which is, let's go buy 4 plumbing companies, and we're going to do this as a more traditional route, and we're not going to get into getting a technology and hoping that we can find a product market fit and raise the capital to go public. These are your odds. So when you're looking at, do I want to do this, this is what you need to prepare yourself for, but also it's going to affect your family, it's going to affect your kids, it's going to affect everyone in your ecosystem because of all the stress you're going to bring to them every time you go to a social event or a party. It's worth it, but it's not easy. And so you want to go in with as much information as you possibly can to not make mistakes that have already been made. Don't think that you have to do almost anything for the first time new. You just have to innovate on your product. You just have to find the market. Everything else should be done exactly like every other successful startup out there. So spend your time understanding how not to fail. So very quickly, when you think about your transition, if you catch a tiger by the tail, so to speak, and you are growing really quickly, you need to very, very diligently think about your transition. It's going to happen quickly. It's going to happen in a way that you're not expecting. It's going to cause a huge amount of disruption to your business, or you're going to have a transition plan in place. It's going to create value by bringing in other more talented CEOs. You're going to lower the risk for you as a shareholder, and you're going to lower the risk of you having an enormous amount of stress doing things that you're not qualified to do. So that's the message, in my opinion, on what kind of things you should be thinking about as a CEO. I've given you the odds, but now that we understand the rounds, these are kind of the odds of being fired at each stage. And so you really want to think about, as a CEO, what stage you want to be an expert in. What stage you need to be really rinsing and repeating to understand the skill set. Let's see. So this is kind of the last bit in terms of what kind of transition plan should you put in place. So when you start the company, you're going to own 80% of the shares, and you're probably not going to take a salary, and you're probably going to put yourself on the board of directors and call yourself the chairman. And when you do that, I want you to think about all the salary that you're not taking, the options that a CEO, imagine you were hiring another person to come in, the options that they would be getting, and the title of chairman. Those are all economic benefits that you can give away when new people come in, or you can keep. So you need to think about yourself as an employee, you need to think about yourself as a shareholder, and you need to think about yourself as a board of directors. And I recommend at the very beginning, when no one's around and no one cares, to figure out how to write the best board of directors agreement, to have the best CEO agreement. Probably 99 out of 100 entrepreneurs don't know what single trigger options are. Single trigger options are probably the most important tool to making money in your company. Single trigger options means when you sell the company, you get paid. Double trigger options mean you sell the company, you have to work for another 2 or 3 years to revest your options. Those golden handcuffs show up every time at an exit, and the guy that's getting paid and running off to the bank is the CEO that knew about single trigger options. You don't write that in when you've got other people that are negotiating with you. You do it right at the beginning. How about severance? 6-month severance is way more important than getting an extra $20,000 a year bonus. Think of the peace of mind that you'll have knowing that if you get fired, you have time to recover at full salary. So we need to really think about our CEO employment agreement, our board of directors agreement, and our shareholder. The other element, and I think people in this crowd understand the Puerto Rico incentives well enough, but if you're doing this in the United States, not Puerto Rico, you need to understand what's called QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock. All you have to do, if you're a founder, is hold that stock for 5 years and you pay 0 tax on it. Since most VCs are going to require you to relocate in the US domicile, Delaware, Wyoming, more traditional entity, you need to plan for QSBS today. You need to hold your shares in a way that allows you to take advantage of those 0 capital gains. A couple of other things, and this kind of gets into as quickly as I possibly can, don't do the mistakes that I've made over time. Don't found teams with your friends. Don't found teams with your family. Don't take money from your family. Don't take money from your friends. You guys have heard that. Don't do it. And when somebody says, but what about, the answer is don't do it. Ever. If you can't get the startup off the ground without taking money from your family or hiring your friends, don't start the company. That's all I can say about that. There's no exception. There's no reason to do it. The stats are crystal clear. Your failure mode goes way up if you have friends and family involved in your business. The stats are crystal clear on this. It's logical. Do you think it's very statistically likely that you have the best software engineer in your friend group that you go get drunk on the beach with? No, that's not very statistically likely. So you need to have the skill set to go out and recruit from outside of your network to find the best possible talent. If you're having to raise money from your family, it likely means that no one else will give you money, which means it's not a well-baked idea, it's not a strong idea, it's too risky for their money. these are the hard rules. And I like to read these very quickly because these are answers to, and I'll share this because it kind of shows up small. These are questions that I'll get asked. I'm probably giving this talk 50 times. These are the questions I get asked every time, and I want to go through them for you so you can just check these off your list. So, should founders vest? Yes, 4 years. What that means is don't have 3 people start a company, all 3 of you take a third of the common shares and say, let's go start a company. That's almost a guaranteed failure mode on those shares. Make everybody have to vest their options. Divorce and death happens. It happened to me. Our chief technical officer died of a brainstem stroke at 36 years old. It's an unbelievable tragedy that you never could have expected, except it happens all the time, and it's right in the stats. Don't do it. Make the shares vest in the options. Should you go for venture capital money? People spend enormous amount of time in entrepreneurial ecosystems and talking and thinking about VCs. Go build something that the market wants. Test it and prove it and show that it works. Then go out and garner investment. It's the hard work that's going to allow you to raise money down the line. Patents, 99% of them are totally worthless. People don't understand how to monetize patents. They don't know how to commercialize them. Your idea is likely terrible and worthless and not patentable. Don't bother. See, entrepreneurs get stuck on this. Can't tell anybody about my idea because they're going to steal it. I got to get my patent issue. It's going to be, I'm going to fall behind and lose the race. Patenting is a game, and unless you're really, really good at it, in the early days, the focus is on product market fit and building something the market wants. Once you raise enough capital, you'll be able to protect your IP or buy yourself out of the problem that you couldn't solve when you didn't have money. Should you require venture capitalists or investors or advisors to sign NDAs? No. It's amateur hour. Don't do that. How much equity should you give a partner? There's a calculator for this. You just go to the calculator and you calculate it. People get in fights constantly about this. You just go to the calculator, there's an enormous amount of market data, and you figure out the split. It's easy. Should you have a technical co-founder if you're not technical? You don't have to. If you really understand the customer and you really can understand what they need, you can outsource that. You don't have to have a genius IT guy, software guy, scientist to found the company. Should you ever trade equity for services? No, never, ever. It's always going to end up, they'll take your equity, and then they'll ask you for more money. And they'll just assume the equity is free. It's never worth doing that in the early days. A couple more. Should you build a product, and how should you market your app? The real key in the early days is making sure that the market wants what you're proposing. You don't have to build anything. Figure out all the tools that you can utilize to prove that the market wants this, and then it gets really easy to go raise the money, raise the resources to go out and build the app. And so I recommend work very, very hard on product market fit before you're spending a lot of money on a new gadget or a new technology. How much dilution is too much dilution? You heard me say it before. Somebody's willing to give you money in early days, you take it. You take it with a lot of responsibility that you might not be able to pay it back. You take money from somebody and don't pay it back, you'll never speak to that person again. But if they're offering you money and you believe you have a good chance, take it. At any valuation, at any time, it's critical to be able to get to a transaction. The rest of these, I think, I'll send the presentation out later. But essentially, a lot of the things associated with scale, SEO, paid ads, all the stuff that people worry about in early days, don't do that in early days. Don't worry about all the optimization on the marketing side. Make sure you understand your customer. Make sure that customer wants to buy your product. Make sure you know how much to charge that customer for your product. That's my advice in early days. When do you hire somebody full-time? When you have revenues. Don't go hire a 4-person engineering team and burn money with full-time employees before you have revenues. How long does it take to raise money? It's probably the number one question I get asked. If you're the best business in class, 6 months. Best. If you're top 20%, 6 to 12 months. If you're not top 20%, you'll never raise money. Ever. You could do it for years. And so you won't get it done unless you're top 20%. Should I pay taxes? Should I pay dividends? All these are just rules that I'm giving you answers that are very quick. I'll put them in the presentation. I got my email at the end, so you can take a look and very quickly get over the hump for these things. Because if you go to the internet, it's like looking up a suspicious thing on your skin and figuring out all the different type of cancers you have. You get terrible advice, and you get scared, and you don't sleep for days. The answers are pretty simple, so happy to share those with you. This is, I got 2 more slides here. Signs that you're dealing with a professional versus an amateur. So if you do any of these things, and don't smile if I say them because I know you've done them, then you're an amateur. Asking people for NDAs, saying things like Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks would love this product and I'm going to get him involved and have it be like Shark Tank. Showing them that we're just going to grab a 0.1% of this gigantic market, and that's all we need to make it to break even. So a lot of these things, when you see a startup do this, you know that they've not done it before, and you've got to get that out of your vocabulary. Here's where you know you're dealing with a professional. So somebody that goes from idea, concept, product, test, customer feedback to revenue, and that's all they care about. That's all they care about. That's all they're showing is traction on that. They're maniacal about cutting costs. Every dollar that they spend has 50 different jobs. They sell their product to everybody in the room all day, 24/7, as the CEO. They're not hiring a business person and saying, go talk to VP of Biz Dev. They're sitting with you until you write that $20 check to get that product shipped to them. Those are signs that you're dealing with a professional. Somebody that says yes to every meeting and they don't know what they're trying to do is somebody that is, at the time, trying to build that network for the product, trying to build that network for the company. So I built this course, and I give it away for free, and I answer any of your questions that you have for as long as you want. You just email me there, and I'll tell you a couple of things. I've been doing free talks like this, like I said, probably 50 of them. The majority of entrepreneurs get tired of asking questions. So I think the most I've ever gotten was like maybe 30 or 40 questions from a group that was really working hard. What I found is the answer's out there. It's whether you're willing to get naked and figure out and say that you don't know what's happening. So I highly encourage you, if it's not me, find a mentor like you're going to find today and ask them every possible question that comes up. Confirm everything that you're doing, because the mentors that are in this room that have gone through it before are happy to share. You just have to listen and you just have to ask. I'm very happy that you guys got a chance to come out today. I'm happy to take any questions that you'd have offline. I think we're running a little bit late. And I wish you all the best in your journey. Thank you.